All right, welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you're new. Trying something a little bit different. I've been flipping back and forth between 4-color control with no red, 5-color. I started with including red, then 4-color with no red, then 3-color with no white, and now 3-color with no red or no green, right? So red's been out for a while, but now I'm on the Esper side. And the reason that I'm trying this is because I was feeling pretty frustrated by the lack of plows. Just not having Swords to the Plowshares just feels so bad in your control deck. There's just too many things that it answers too cleanly, and I was just really like, I would win games, but it was like everything was a struggle to deal with creatures, and if I didn't counter them right on time, it just got worse and worse. So I decided, you know what, let me flip it and add plows in. But the problem with that, as I saw it, was that if I'm running plows, I get so much weaker to counter spell decks, and particularly combo decks, because I don't really have as good of disruption. The green version gave me access to, the main disruption that it gave me access to was Life from the Loam Wasteland recursion. But then I thought, you know what, I can probably just get away with running Crucible Worlds. It's roughly the same thing. You don't get the loam for 2, and you don't get the fact that it's not, it's very hard to counter it permanently, and you don't get the fact that you can fill your hand up with junk and then brainstorm that away. Those are all really good reasons to run loam, and I would probably still be playing it, along with Uro also being extremely good. If I thought that I could support the green here, I would probably run it. However, I'm not sure that I can. And on the flip side, what I realized was that I really wanted, I wanted more disruption. I decided I would like to try running Cabal Therapy. And the thing about Therapy is, what I was thinking is that because Bowmasters gives you an extra chump to just pitch into Therapy, I mean, if it's a giant creature, you probably just win the game by smashing them in the face. But when it's just when you throw down Bowmasters and then on the next turn you play a land, you Therapy them, and then flash Therapy back, you get information and disruption all together, and you still have the Bowmasters creating a problem for them, and it's really, really good. So with that, I decided I wanted the 4 Bowmasters to fuel my therapies, but I also wanted to I needed a little bit more support for the Cabal therapies than just the 4 Bowmasters, I thought. So I decided initially I would run up to 4 Staff of the Storyteller. So Staff of the Storyteller creates a 1/1 flyer when it comes into play. Whenever you do create a token, you put a counter on the staff, and then for a white and a tap, you can take that counter off and draw a card. And so what that means is because it creates the 1/1, it comes into play, immediately triggers itself, and then you can remove the counter and draw a card, and you have a 1/1 flyer and a staff left over. And that's pretty cool. But it gets really good if you have multiple staffs, because the second staff, if you were to play multiple staffs, I'm currently not, but the second staff would trigger both itself and the other staff. So you play the second staff and get a counter on the first and second one, and then you could theoretically draw 2 cards. But I tried running 4 with that in mind, and of course Bowmasters creating a token will also proc Staff of the Storyteller. So it's really cool that you can get a staff, and then you can flash out a Bowmasters, and you can get another you turn Bowmasters into card drawing, which is kind of amazing. Card drawing on your schedule too, so you don't have to draw it immediately. So like if they have a Bowmasters, you can fight over that and deal with it, and then start accumulating your cards or whatever. So I really like that, but I found that the 4 Staff of the Storytellers I was running just to test the engine was kind of jank. The problem with it is I don't really, once again, I don't want to be tapping out early. So the problem with the other problem with the green deck was that while I had the creature, the 1-drop green creature who makes legends uncounterable and taps for mana, I didn't want to be tapping mana on turn 1 because I usually wanted to be sitting on Stifle or Brainstorm, and so I was finding that it was a 1-drop that I didn't want to play on turn 1. Well, Staff ends up being a 2-drop that you don't really want to play most of the time on turn 2, because you want to be sitting on, in this deck, you want to be sitting on Counterspell or Bowmasters. Now at 2 it's cheap and you can get to 3 or 4 mana and then play it, Often on 3, it's totally fine, especially if you have a therapy. Like you therapy them and then you play the staff and then you flashback therapy immediately and then you draw a card on the next turn, which is amazing. Or you can sit on like a stifle and a staff or something like that, totally fine. But 4 was just too much, so I dropped it down, and I dropped down to I actually had one staff in the board for Karn to be able to reach out and grab, and then I realized that most of the time that's a low impact play. Karn reaching out and grabbing a staff of the storyteller is not like scary for anybody. It's kind of a relief if you see that, so I just took it out of the sideboard. It's a great card to be the 5th Cabal Therapy fuel in this deck. 4 of them that are disruption and 1 that replaces itself with a card drop, but that was kind of enough. I didn't need one in the board, so I just left my sideboard as is. I made one adjustment. I took out Aether Spellbomb, which I never brought in, and added Nihil Spellbomb, which increases my removal to for graveyards, my graveyard hate to 5 in the sideboard. And it adds graveyard hate to the main deck because we have Ashiok and Bog, but now we have Karn too. And so against a deck where Karn isn't necessarily good, we still have the ability to, for example, a graveyard base strategy, we might be able to snag ourselves a Nihil Spellbomb and then use that to do something good if we're not grabbing the One Ring. And then there's the Jitte over here, which just being a card that you can use to grab and start clearing the board if there's for some reason something swimming through your 4 Plows and Bowmasters. Having that Jitte is really nice. It's also really nice if you're playing against burn and you just need to like get your life total back up so that you're out of burn range. That's a great grab for Karn as well. And the One Ring is what the One Ring does. One of the tricks for this deck is that you can snag a One Ring and you can use the One Ring a bunch. And then when the One Ring becomes inconvenient, provided Karn's still in play, you can Karn the One Ring and then you can Karakas it back to your hand, or you can Karakas the One Ring with Karn over and over to prevent yourself from taking damage, or you can Karn the One Ring to make it a creature, and then you can flashback Cabal Therapy and just get rid of it that way. So we have those tricks along with the Teferi to bounce it. So it's really not like in this deck, the One Ring works better as a sideboard grab than it did in the Sultai deck, which is pretty cool. And of course, you can also Karn it and you can Jace it back to your hand as well if you have that running. Although, I mean, if you have the One Ring and Jason Karn out, like you game's already over. But you have choices, and that's the key thing. Is like, your control deck. At least in my view, a control deck needs to be able to. You should be able to answer why every card's in your deck, and you should also be able to have like your control deck. Ideally, if it's not just pure aggro control, which is essentially a tempo deck that tries to beat you before it runs out of counters, like think like I don't know, Delver, right? Blue-red. So it just tries to like chip in some damage, force a couple of key spells, and then kill you before, because then it's just out of gas, right? So that, as opposed to that, an actual control deck where you're expecting the game to go long, if obviously this deck can kill early, but if it doesn't, well, in a deck like that, in a pure control deck, you need to have a solution to all of the problems out there. You need to know the meta well enough to be able to solve all the different scenarios you're going to be put in. Otherwise, you're just a control deck that can't control a particular strategy, and that's not a control deck at all. So this feels much better. Incidentally, having the one Crucible as my only artifact means that it's a little, if it comes up, it's a little hard for my opponent to decide if they want to leave in or take out or sideboard in artifact hate, which is a good thing. It makes sideboarding a little tougher for them. But it also gives you a, if you have a Crucible out and they do get a Planeswalker into play, you could potentially Karn and then just attack their Planeswalker with your Crucible. Or in a long game, you could just literally beat your opponent's face in with a Crucible. So like you Crucible lock them out of the game with Wastelands, and then you just beat them down with Karn. Maybe you've forced your whole hand away, you've got nothing else, but they have no mana. So that, that's a totally valid win condition here. There's a few other funky tricks you can do, like really weird stuff, like you could Bog yourself and then grab your Crucible if somehow it was destroyed, and like, I mean, there's some weird esoteric plays, but those are sort of not what we're playing for. Finally, so I have Storyteller as I said, as the 5th Bowmaster essentially for Cabal Therapy, and then I have a 6th, which is Monastery Mentor. Monastery Mentor is just a powerhouse in a deck with, well, what is this? 36 spells. It's a pretty good card, or roughly, I think we're 36 spells. What it can do, if you happen to get Mentor combined with Storyteller, what you end up is you create a scenario where every time you cast a spell, you create a token, and every time you create a token, you put a counter on the staff. So what it means is all of your spells turn into card draw. This plus this equals having a beanstalk, up the beanstalk, for all of your cards, which is kind of cool too. So that's a nice little interaction that you can pull off. Ashiok is in here as Graveyard Hate number 2 and Stifle number 5. Basically stifling all in perpetuity, all of their search effects that they might want to play, which includes fetch lands, of course. And Teferi is just obviously, I mean, it's a catch-all as well as, hate for counters. Narset is Bowmaster number 5. So we have essentially 5 Stifles, 5 Bowmasters, Teferi and Cabal Therapy, and all the counters to fight with counter magic. We have a ton of card draw with the 4 Lorians, Karn, Jace. Narset's technically card draw. Teferi can be card draw, staff, search, and all that. And we have a singular tithe. So the deck has 1 tithe. I know I kind of decried this card being useful before. The reason I did not like it in the 4-color deck was that I would play a Savannah and a Scrub and a Tundra and a Tithe, and the 4-color deck's mana was just pulled too many different directions. You want to play minimal number of non-blue lands, but having a few is pretty good. So we have exactly 1 Scrub, but 3 Tundras. So Tithe has 4 targets that it can go get. So as you're fetching, you do kind of want to think about like potentially leaving in planes for a Tithe to fetch. But other than that, and the exact mix of duels and fetches may be tweaked as a move forward. But other than that, not too much to think about. There's a couple of Fragmentize in here. There's a lot of like threatening artifacts and enchantments. These could be something else. For example, I mean, maybe a better choice other than Fragmentize could be Portable Hole. However, I really like Frag. There's some other options too, like we could run the Anti-Planeswalker Disenchant, the 2-mana one. It's a black and white. It's this thing. Let's see if I can find it. We could run Fracture. So Fracture is an instant that destroys an artifact, enchantment, or planeswalker. I wish, if this thing said Exile, I'd be more inclined to run it, since it would then be able to deal with the One Ring. This deck can deal with it since we have all the Bowmasters and whatnot, but we obviously don't want it to stay in play in general. So that would be nice. But the main thing is Fragmentize, just like Fracture, can target enchantments, and that's the reason that I'm not running the Portable Hole, because Portable Hole can target non-land enchantments. It can target non-land anythings, while this can only target artifacts and enchantments, but we're siding it in because we're assuming there's lots of targets, and it does not say non-land, and what that means is they can go first turn Saga, and you can go first turn Fragmentize, which is just as good as stifling a fetch, right? This is Time Walk, basically, and it's just very valuable to be able to kill Urza's Saga for a single white. Also, against a lot of the Bant decks and stuff, they'll bring in Carpet of Flowers, and being able to just 1 mana remove that Carpet of Flowers is fantastic. Or against like a mono blue or mostly blue deck that tries to play a game with Back to Basics, being able to just play a land and then get rid of it is pretty valuable. Okay, so that's it as far as the changes go between the two decks. And then, so how's it doing? Well, I don't have a lot of games, but I do have some and a few good ones too. So you see, I've got everything turned on here, and up to, I want to say, so this right here is where I made the current version. This loss is where I took out the 4 Staff of the Storytellers. It was janky and it wasn't great. I played these games with I think Inkmat Nexus and Crabador here. I played with the 4 staffs, and I got a couple losses, two wins and 1 loss, and it was I was like going, there's something not right about this. And then I played here and I drew like multiples of them, and it was just garbage. And I said, okay, this isn't going to work. So I tweaked it to the version you got now, added the Cabal Therapies to the main, or rather adjusted my early interaction. I think it was trying out 4, and I brought it down to 2, and put the other 2 on the sideboard. And then from there, went on a very nice, happy little win streak. Now, somebody mentioned whether or not I should play, they'd like to see me play in a tournament. I plan to. I'm just trying to get to a point where I'm settled and feel like good about the deck, where it feels correct and not like, this is working, but I'm like struggling to get my wins. Like, I'm getting my wins, but I'm only getting my wins because it's a blue control deck, and I'm a blue control player, not because necessarily the deck is providing the wins, but because I just can squeeze a win out of most blue decks if you put one in my hands. But it felt, that's kind of how the Sultai deck was feeling, and it was kind of like 2-1, I got a win here, a couple losses, and all this stuff. Anyway, switch over to this. It feels really good. Feels really good to play. Obviously, some nice results. I did have a double against Matt, because this gentleman, Matthew, S325, is playing Bant control with Loam, which should be a real problem for me. Up the Beanstalk, Loam, Uro, like recursion, threats, problem. So I wanted to make sure that the deck is strong against that deck. It seems pretty good. So now we'll run through the games. And I promise this last match against Matthew was fantastic. I think all the games are good, but boy, that last one was fun. So we'll get to that. My plan is to play more, probably produce 1 or 2 more videos, depending on where things are at. We get to a stable deck, I'll try entering some tournaments. It'll have to be. It also is tricky with between my home life and work. I have to find time to be able to set aside a block of time for tournaments, which is kind of the challenge too. But it can be done, and my plan is to do it. So let's get to where we've got something sweet, and then let's give it a shot. So starting with game 1 against Matthew, we'll go ahead and do this, and then we'll do Voldemort and Chuck Berry or whoever he is, and then we'll get back to Matthew again. And you'll see a fantastic. The last game was just so satisfying. So here we are. I don't think that the build is any much different. I think this is the exact build, actually. If I do see a change, I'll let you know. But I don't believe that there is. I may have added Tithe at the very end as like one small adoption. I think Tithe was land number 20 or something. And now I have 19, but I have a Tithe in that slot. But anyway, opponent leads off with Flooded Strand. I do Delta, stifle their Strand. Opponent forces, so they do get a... this is interesting. A lot of people are playing these tap lands for surveil purposes, and then turn 2 Beanstalk. Not happy to see that. I did see a force and a mill of a prismatic ending, forcing with Brainstorm. Glad to see a Brainstorm go, but pretty sad there. All right, for my turn, I Brainstorm, play a land, and pass. My opponent Brainstorms, plays a land. Down to 2 cards in hand, plays another up the Beanstalk. So this is bad news, right? Like, another control deck with 2 draw engines going is not what I want to be seeing. All right, so we'll cycle and grab a seat. However, I am playing Bowmasters. Let's go for it. And I kicked myself so hard. When he let the Cabal Therapy resolve, so my plan was play Cabal Therapy, name Force of Will, play Bowmasters, get whatever else is in their hand. And I punted. I played Cabal Therapy and changed my mind and said like Leyline Binding, and my opponent had Force of Will. I didn't do it because I was thinking, well, who doesn't Force of Will here and get some extra cards and prevent me from getting extra information, right? I was so mad at myself for doing this. So anyway, My opponent ponders. I'm going to flash in response. Hopefully the card he drew is not blue, because if it isn't, this Bowmaster is resolves, because they've got no ponder in hand. They've got a Force of Will. Now they might have a blue card, but it's a little late. All right. So I do have Cabal Therapy available to me, but I don't know what's in my opponent's hand other than Force of Will. And I feel like if I Flashback Therapy, taking my pressure off the board, that's probably a mistake. We've got the Beanstalk Shrine. Now with the Narset and a Force of Will up, I think I will. So I flash it back, targeting them. They Force of Will up the Beanstalk triggers, so we get more pressure going. So it's not a disaster, right? My opponent, of course, countered it. And then I slam Narset, and it resolves. Yum. All right. And I grab myself a Brainstorm. My opponent passes for the turn. All right. I'm going to Brainstorm first, so I can Narset past what I don't want. Play a Wasteland, target one of their lands. Opponent floats mana. I activate Narset, rather. They fetch. And I stifle their fetch, and at this point, I mean, they're out of brain. They're clearly not going to be. It doesn't matter if they Force a Will here. They're not going to trigger. They're not drawing extra cards for now. And if they do, of course, they get punished later. But this basically locked off. It shut down their entire engine. And I think my opponent's correct to to concede here. I know that the top card of my library is land, so if my opponent wasted in response, I was going to Brainstorm and then grab that land and put my Swords to Plowshares back. But anyway, so we move on to game 2. And now I get to sideboard. So the way I sideboarded against Bant, where I didn't see any real threats, it's risky, but I decided to play the odds and go with the risks. I went ahead and just sideboarded these 4 out. And because I expect to see, I bring in these 2. And because I expect to see, well, we know where they have Beanstalks, and also I'm expecting Carpet of Flowers, I bring in these 2. So my deck after sideboarding looks like this. And I thought about Leylines and everything, but I decided no, I've got Ashiok to deal with the graveyard, Bog to deal with the graveyard, and Karn grabbing Spellbomb to deal with the graveyard. So I'm not going to go with the graveyard hate route because their deck's not hard enough graveyard focused, and I'm going to need, what would I cut to bring in 4 Leylines? And then I have to mulligan into them. Quite often against the graveyard decks, I actually cut the Bowmasters or the Plows and then bring in the Leylines. But against this opponent, that doesn't seem, it seems risky enough already, because now there's the possibility for him to beat me with the Dredge, the Blue Dredge Flyer, if I don't get one of my bounce cards or counter it or whatever. They could also beat me with Uro, but it'd be a lot harder because I do have at least Caracas. My opponent plays Carpet of Flowers. I'm going to play Strand here, so I have a Stifle up in case they have a fetch. I'll deal with the Carpet in a second. And funny enough, I'm just playing lands that don't trigger it. Now's the time. I'm going to go for it. They've got 5 cards in hand. Frag in response. They Brainstorm. Okay, got it. All right, so that problem's dealt with. Also, the scrub land in here. Opponent Miracle's Triumph of Saint Catherine. I did not see that game 1, but I'm going to go ahead and stifle that so that they have to get to 5 mana to pull it off. And they play a Loam to just get it started. This is bad news for me. I top deck Force of Negation. Ugh, awesome. So they Miracle another Triumph. They had double Triumph of Saint Catherine on top. Well, I'm going to counterspell that. I don't need to Force a Negation now. And they miss a land drop, so obviously they're going to go for Loam next, I assume, unless there's a third Miracle. I was thinking about cycling Lorien here, but I decided not to because the thing about it is I may want to Force with it and have a Stifle. I'm going to hardcast Force on their Loam. I'm expecting them to skip their draw step, so they can't play something I'm going to Stifle this turn because they're going to Loam, right? They're going to flip this and try to mill some lands and then play it and get their engine going. And I'm just going to Force that and then basically Time Walk for the turn, right? So, yeah, so they do exactly that. And we just Force of Negation here. All right, cool. Plus, who knows what I might... Oh, look at that. Ashiok off the top. So if my opponent has any more of that going on, it's dealt with, and now all their fetch lands are taken care of. On their turn, they play an Up the Beanstalk, and I do force with the Lorien. I go ahead and exile some more cards, so now you can kind of get a feel for what's going on over there. And play my Singular Staff. I have pressure, sort of. And in my exile zone is Lorien. Opponent gets a Wasteland and goes for Prismatic Ending. I'm going to draw a card, and then, yeah, it's dead. Unfortunately, I forced with my Lorien, so I can't Sanctuary it back into my hand here and set up for some card draw, which is disappointing. And I do top deck a land, which isn't much of a top deck. So I'm going to go ahead and Mystic Sanctuary a counterspell. I've got plenty of mana up. I'd like to, my opponent hasn't gotten going yet, and as long as they haven't gotten going, I'd like to get a counter in my hand to slow them down, right? So I could stifle Uro's draw trigger here, but it's far more valuable to stifle a Wasteland. And they're basically just cycling it. If I stifle his escape clause, actually my opponent would get to keep it. Of course, I could also Caracas it. So what I'm expecting to happen is that my opponent's going to Wasteland my Caracas and then get the Uro down. I'm going to stifle that and then make Uro very hard for them to use. Of course, with it in the graveyard, I could Ashiok it now, but I'm going to leave Ashiok alone until they get close to being able to play the Uro, and then I'll go ahead and do it, because they're clearly got a lot of graveyard-based stuff going on, and I may want to dig in a little deeper. And my patience rewards me as they hit another Uro, and not a land to go with it. I mean, they got a Plains, but in between, but they didn't actually Uro into a fifth land. Narset off the top's very pretty. I tap incorrectly here. This is a painful mistake. What I needed to do was tap that Caracas there and have 3 blue ups so that I can't be Wastelanded, because I want to stifle the Wasteland and cast a counter spell. Anyway, here I'm going to go ahead and I decide I'm going to go ahead and get Cabal Therapy, because I know that they have Triumph of St. Catherine, and I don't want them to get to their 5th mana and burn my counter spell. So this is what's exiled. So when they reveal their hand, it looks like something like, that's the first one that was revealed. This is the second one that was revealed, and this is what's in their hand. So I take the Triumph out of their hand with Cabal Therapy, and then I flashback Cabal Therapy and take both Solitudes, leaving them with just Plow and Ponder as their last 2 cards. So I just kind of mind twisted my opponent with this Staff of the Storyteller here. Opponent ponders and passes, and now they've got lots of mana. They're 1 mana away from Uro, so we're going to go ahead and dig, grab another counterspell, and put Uro in the exiled zone with the rest of this junk. And my opponent has pondered, so the only card I know about is Plow. Okay, we'll go ahead and counter that. And with my opponent locked under the inability, they cannot search, they can't get a graveyard going. I mean, they could start one, but obviously I can deal with it. And then that would free them up to search again, but it's pretty hard for them to do both with only 1 card in hand, and they can't draw extra cards. And the only card in their hand is a Plow. My opponent just scoops it up. My Staff is unfortunately exiled to their, whatever that Prismatic Ending, but feeling, pretty happy with the result of that. And we move on to Voldemort here. Oh. Wasn't supposed to say that. All right. And, I keep trying to go as if they have a commander. All right, so I've got to keep. Yeah. This is what I mean about, this is what I meant about the turn 1 plays. We just don't want to play anything turn 1. I fetch there because if my opponent's playing a Wasteland deck, I want to stifle it, and if they're not, if they're playing a fetch, I want to stifle it. But if they were playing a fetch land, and I cracked at the end of their turn to cycle Lorien, and they stifled me, well, that'd be pretty bad, right? So we're going to go this route. I've got a window here for search. I'm just going to get it down. It does mean that they get to play Island Ponder, but I am okay with that. All right, let's see what our top card is. Ooh, I would like that very much, because that initiates Narset. My opponents may not have a counterspell. It does not. All right, let's dig. I grab Staff here and pass. Now I'll have something to protect my Narset a little bit, and they Wasteland my Wasteland. So, okay. I'm going to get rid of the Lorien Revealed, Narset into Brainstorm. I'm going to go ahead and just Brainstorm, fix my hand up. And Lorien, I decided to get rid of the staff here. I'm unsure, and then I therapy them. And I name Force of Will. I don't make the mistake again. So no forces, so I know exactly what I'm dealing with. Another loam deck, another Beanstalk loam deck. Ugh, okay. Opponent Island Cycles, so we'll take that and that. I'm going to force this loam, and they force back. Exiling Brainstorm. Okay, so this kind of got nasty. Alright, I'm going to start digging. And let's slam a Teferi. I should have probably just minused here. But, well, I know they've got loam, so maybe I don't. Unfortunately, there goes the Escanta, and then they loam some more. But their hand's getting pretty low. They've got a Murktide. I guess that's why I didn't do the Teferi. All right, we're doing some shenanigans over here with deck manipulation. And I'm going to pass. My opponent's just going to go loam, loam, loam. Obviously, if you're them, that's what you do. You just keep loaming and wasting until I'm out of the game. They go for up the Beanstalk. Of course, I'm going to let that resolve. They don't get to draw a card off of it, and they don't get to draw cards off the trigger because of Narset. And while we're at it, we'll add Injury to Insult and get a Bowmaster out and start chipping away. So now, if we want to play loam games, they can. I did finally use Teferi, by the way, and just to dig deeper last turn. All right, I've got Therapy. I'm going to go ahead and Therapy them, and we'll take out the Murktide Regent. And if you notice, what's left in their hand is all mana. It's just a bunch of mana. Well, I mean, that's what happens when you loam every turn. All right, plus that up, swing. And I'm going to hold Tundra Plow and just protect my options here. I can check off their lands now, but yeah, we've seen that. I mean, it's a little bit hard to keep up with the loam, but bottom line is they've got one real card. Okay, well, swinging again. And I need to increase the clock here. So I'm going to bounce my Bowmasters, and look at that lovely thing. I've already played a land for the turn, so I can't really do anything with that. Oh yeah, they don't even have the Murktide, right? I flashed it back and took it. Yeah, they've got nothing. And for their turn, they play a Pernicious Deed, and I decide Deed doesn't kill my Planeswalkers. I've got other things to do, and now that I've got an answer for loam, this is fine. Alright, so they Deed for 2, and that takes out their Beanstalk anyway. And now, goodbye loam. Yep. There we go. And this is game 1. Love having the metagame cards in here that address this kind of nonsense. So they've got one Wasteland that we know about and 2 jank lands, right? I'm going to go ahead and flash this out now because it allows me to hold the counter up. And we're back to my opponent being under pressure. But they can't counter and they can't draw. So they're under pressure and all they've got is loam going on. I've got a counter spell ready. I've got my plows. And they just scoop it up, and we move on to game 2. I didn't realize like how much Beanstalk I've been seeing, but I've seen quite a bit of it. I don't know if maybe it won a big tournament or something, or it's just posting good results. Opponent mulligans to 5 here, really nice to see. And I lead off, and decides to go second, which was really interesting, recognizing that it is a control-on-control match, and tempo isn't as important. However, against the Stifle deck, I don't know. I am not going to tap out here. I am going to sit on Stifle with that juicy flooded strand waiting to die. Oh, there we go. And Time Walk, my opponent. They do get to ponder free from Bowmaster interference, but harassment rather. But I like this so much better. Way ahead on tempo. Let's go ahead and make sure that I have planes if I happen to top deck like Teferi or whatever. I'd like to be able to do something with that. There's Therapy, but it's more important to Wasteland him here, and we can Therapy next turn. We can Therapy, Flashback Therapy, presumably if the Bowmasters resolves, right? All right, so let's see if it does. And of course, my sideboarding was the same as I demonstrated last time. All right, it sticks, beautiful. We'll just swing in for some chip damage, and of course therapy them. And yes, I'm gonna name. What do I choose to name? So they cycle Lorien Revealed in response, which I can't stifle, because I don't have one. And I choose to name Up the Beanstalk against them. And because they fetched for a Bayou, and I was thinking, like, well, what gets them back in the game, right? Does Force of Will get them back in the game? Not really. Up the Beanstalk would. So, and look at that. Brainstorm, Bowmasters, Plow, Tundra, and a Beanstalk. All right, so we hit there on the first part, and we're going to flash it back. We're going to hit again and take out their Bowmasters, which leaves them with Tundra, Brainstorm, Plow. They go for a Plow, and I'm going to counter that. So their Tundra and their Bowmasters, Plow. So all they have is Brainstorm now. I cycle and play Search for Escanta. I'm sitting on a Fragmentize in case something slips through. And then they're going for Desperation Brainstorm, right? Oh yeah, they don't have Bowmasters either. So now we don't know what's in their hand. But we know what's on the board, and it's a problem for them. So they Surgical, and they take out all of my Wastelands, which costs them 2 life, and okay. I mean, it means that they get to play the game. Alright, so presumably they're going to have Loam in their deck. I don't think they would sideboard it out, so let's just nuke their graveyard right now. That also takes care of my bigger concern, which was that they might have the giant blue Delve Flyer. They play a Leovold, which I found in Beans to be... I found Leovold to be actually terrible in this meta. Alright, I see a counterspell. I'm not going to... Despite wanting to flip Search, I'm going to be patient here. A counterspell is way too valuable to throw away just to get closer to flipping a Search. I hit him with the Orc. They 100% should have just blocked here. Their life is way too low. They should have just blocked here and dealt with... And just made it a 3/3 that kills this stupid thing. Of course, they then ponder, and I mean, what are they going to do? There's nothing they can do here. Like, they're totally toast. And one of the reasons Leovold's so bad is, like, imagine if I do target them, right? They're at 3, so I target them, and they can draw a card, and then I ping them, targeting them, which means that they can draw a card, and then I ping them, which means they can just die, right? So at some point they have to stop drawing, so it doesn't even really do much if the Bowmasters is actually in play. It doesn't do all that much. It does, So anyway, opponent ponders though, and we move on to the next opponent, which is Chunk Buckle. Not Chuck Berry, Chunk Buckle. All right. And this opponent did not enjoy... I think this opponent had a number of comments. I'm going to maybe read them if they're not like invectives. I can't recall if it was cursing or what. This is I wasn't 100% happy about keeping this because I don't have a turn 1 play, and you really want a turn 1 play in the deck that's loaded with them. But fortunately, my opponent leads off a little slow. I'm going to cycle. I don't exactly know what I'm basing here. So I go grab a Tundra because I'd like to get Teferi down. I'm just going to play the Snow Island in the fetch so that I'm protected from Wasteland. I can sit on a counterspell. Underground Sea... Volcanic Badlands. I don't know what this deck is. Maybe it's a homebrew. That's actually cool if it is. Anyway, Fable is definitely going to get countered though. Okay, no force. It resolves. Cool. Stifle showed up a little late. But with my opponent being on blue, I'm going to slam it to Teferi. I assume they would have forced if they could have there. So yeah, we'll get the Teferi down, and now they can't. And then, if they do play a threat, Teferi can probably deal with it. So they play a Fable, and Teferi can, in fact, deal with it. We'll just bounce that. And because I'm worried about days, I'm going to go ahead and slam Narset here. And they can't counter because of Teferi. And now they can't draw cards because of Narset. So they skip the second phase of the Fable. They go for Fury, and I just stifle it. Of course, if I didn't have the Stifle, so I'm not so unhappy about the Stifle. I'm going to pause. I was very unhappy about the Stifle showing up so late, and then very happy when it showed up for that. Now, of course, I would have brainstormed in response if I didn't have it, and then just force a willed the Fury. But I felt like that was much riskier than stifling because I get to dig real deep this turn and find a Swords to Plow, and I'm playing 4. And that's the difference. One of the key differences between this deck and the Sultai deck. Sultai would have brainstormed in response and prayed to find a Force of Will. the control deck could afford, the Esper deck can afford to burn a Stifle and just play for a either a Bowmaster to just trump block for a couple turns until we can Teferi, or a plow, right? Because we actually have plows. So I also, yeah, so on my turn, so I draw, and yeah, we're in great shape. We're going to brainstorm, and there we go. Never didn't have it, right? Go ahead and set Karn aside. It's not looking super relevant right now. Opponent can't counter back. And then I'm going to go ahead and recur the Lorien Revealed and plus and pass. So at this point, I was actually fixing to Wasteland. I was debating what to Wasteland, because if I go after the black mana, I can't get at all of their black mana, so I kind of want to go after their blue and just make it harder for them to do anything with their blue. But on the other hand, I could cut them off from blue here, 1, 2, 3, or I could cut them off from red. And I've seen a double red card, and it'll be slower to get at the red. But I thought what I would actually do is probably, my ultimate conclusion was to actually hit the volcanic, even though it leaves them with one of each, because that starts me down the path of hosing their blue, while also going after their red. So I would go volcanic first, volcanic second, and then I would decide between sea and Badlands at that point, if we got to that point in the game. But opponent wants nothing to do with it, and they say, what was it that they said? It was something about, they had a few things to say after the game, but it doesn't matter. They basically said that he wasn't rude about it, but he said something like, well done, had the Stifle, and all the, kind of like commenting that I had like the answers at all the perfect times. But if my opponent only knew what he was facing and what my hand looks like, maybe he would realize that it's not as, it wasn't as lucky as you might think. It was lucky. I mean, especially hitting the plows there. I had another look that I could dig into further, but hitting the plows there was lucky. But the rest of it, Anyway, opponent did not enjoy my my perceived excellent luck and decided to log off rather than play some more. So we move on to one more game against the Bant Control. I'm sorry that they're all Beanstalk Control decks, but at least we're getting a feel for how that match plays. It is one of the most important decks in the format. There are many, but it's within the top 10 decks more than likely. So I certainly don't mind getting an extra round against it. And this one has a spectacular finish. So, all right, opponent leads with Wasteland. I've got Stifle, which is great because my mana base is real fragile right now, actually. Not my mana base, but my opening hand mana. All right, I have Wasteland, and I'm up a land, hopefully discouraging from wasting the Tundra here, because I certainly don't want that to happen at the moment. There's a Lorien. Let's go grab a Underground and pass. Tithe and Scrub never really coming up. Alright, my opponent has Misty Rainforest and plays out a Loam. That makes me real unhappy. I do not like seeing that, but I'm not willing to force a will it and then just, like, I don't know, have not a lot going on. My opponent was going to have to discard there, so I almost shouldn't have played out, but I was worried about tempo. And I thought they would just force a will anyway, and then I would be able to get Teferi down. Also, another misplay. Against this specific style of deck right there, I should have just minus Teferi and drew an extra card. Then if they kill it, fine, but I got my card. Well, I didn't do that, so I didn't get my card, so yuck. This is not a very comfortable situation for this deck to be in at all. Alright, opponent goes for Beanstalk. I really don't think I can win if they have that engine running unopposed, so I'm going to, they have the Loam engine running unopposed, right, already, which is a problem. Oh, nice rip. And I have to assume they don't have a counter here, so, oh, that was nice. All right, let's get our 6 land out to their 4, which is probably the only saving grace. Like, they can play the Loam Wasteland game, and inevitably they'll get to me, but it still takes time for them to catch up and then surpass me. And in the meantime, I now found some pressure and some defenses, provided nothing too crazy happens on this next turn. So they beanstalk again, which makes sense. I can't Bowmaster in response. It would make sense to prevent that. Alright, I want to make sure that I can make this play before. I don't want them wasting me like during combat or whatever, because I want to be able to play a counterspell. And if I played that incorrectly, I wouldn't have been able to. Anyway, my opponent plows. Hold on. So I play the Mentor with 3 mana up, and my opponent plays a plow on it. I counterspell, which gives me a monk token, and they Force of Negation, exiling Ponder on my counterspell. So with that on the stack, I plow the exact same monk. My exact same creature. I plow my own creature, my Mentor, with their plow targeting it, in order to proc it again and pick up an extra monk. Because now I've got a significant amount of pressure, right? I've got 3 points per turn and prowess over here. So I'm expecting I'm going to lose to Loam if I don't beat them before I lose to Loam, basically. My opponent understands this and prismatic endings and attacks my resources. Alright, then they Loam. Yep, can't do much about that. There goes one of my black sources. Okay, counterspell. If they go after blue versus black, which one would you do if you're them? Probably black, right? You don't want the pressure to increase. So then they cast a Brainstorm. I am 100% going to counter this. I need to stall. I can't have them converting the lands that they loaned into spells. Alright, Brainstorm here is really nice to see. It gives me some extra damage this turn. I don't hit a land, though. I do find a Force of Will, which is nice. So I do get 3 damage in. My opponent decides to get off the Loam plan for a minute. They're looking for a solution here. They fetch, taking a point of damage there, and Surveil. They cast Loam. I'm just going to counter that because it buys time, and they're at 5. And let's swing in. Alright, so they really probably shouldn't be Loaming. Brainstorm, 100% going to counter that. We just need to stop them from finding a solution. Okay, they're at 3. Swing in and watch this. This is a lot of fun. So I attack and I assume that they got nothing. I have to win now or I'm not going to win. So during combat, I plow my Orc army token while holding control, so I retain priority. And in response to the Plowshares, I plow my Orc army token, which double prowesses this thing and does exactly 3. And Swords to Plowshares turns into the jankest giant growth you've ever seen, but it works. My opponent goes to 3 and dies thanks to this fetch land that they used to go get the Hedge Maze. Ah, what a nice game. So that was a very, very difficult game 1. Alright, but that was, unsideboarded. So now we do the same sideboard I did before. We'll get those plows out of here. And I have a risky keep, but I'm going to do it. I might get wastelanded here, but if I don't, I have a hell of a hand, right? So opponent goes for Loam, and I'm so glad I ripped that bog off the top. And look at this. Everything just came up Millhouse for this game. So we get rid of the Loam immediately. And now they've got a Beanstalk. I am actually going to force that with one of my 3 Stifles. I don't want their engine going. They're down to 4 cards in hand. Let's go ahead and Lorien. My opponent cycles their Lorien and grabs a Tundra. Okay, fair enough. Alright, they've got 4 cards. I'm going to go ahead and Bowmaster here. Shoot them. They're going to plow. That's fine. It's part of the risk, but I had the calculus. I had the extra Bowmaster. And then, ooh, sweet Wasteland for that Tundra. This is one of the problems, one of the challenges for their deck is that they're dealing with all these Stifles and Wastes. That's why this deck does fairly well against other blue decks, is just Stifle is so backbreaking. Ooh, and actually having access to real life counterspell that other players don't have. And of course Bowmasters being Bowmasters. Alright, let's Stifle that. Boom. Nope, no wait for you. The suppression shall continue until the game is won. Well, they've got to proc Bowmasters. They're getting desperate now. That's what desperation looks like. Alright, I don't see their big giant 6/6 flyer or whatever, which I don't have to force. And now I can sit on Counterspell. Now I can do like Counterspell, Force of Will, and then Brainstorm next turn. I decided that there's a good chance that I'll just, because I don't think they have anything at all. I'm just actually, it's a little greedy maybe, but no, I was trying to like set myself up, and I figured, I have the force of will, and yeah. Oops. Can't do it that way, Nate. There we go. Let's draw and then cycle. Ooh, excuse me. All right. I could have faked like pressure with the extra swamp, like potentially having another Bowmasters. I'm going to pause. However, I got the second Tundra because if I do trigger the staff, I might like to draw a card and still have white mana up. Opponent goes for a Solitude, exiling Terminus, and I just counterspell the Solitude. I could stifle the trigger, but this is more mana efficient, and I'd love to Force of Will something if I have to, and then stifle a fetch land or wasteland. So I decided I'll do it that way. They go for Veil of Summer. I am going to have to force the Veil of Summer, though. Unfortunately, and fortunately, they do not have further a further Veil of Summer. That would have been pretty gross if that had happened. Although, I would have shot him a couple times and made a 5/5, so it would have been... Well, no, that's not true. I couldn't shot him. I would have made a 5/5 and shot my own Orc a couple times, and still had a pretty pressuring board, like a pretty scary board for them to deal with. A 1/1, 1/1, and 5/5. But they would have... Is that how that would have worked? No, what would have happened... I'm stupid. We're fighting over a Solitude. So they would have Solitude the Bowmasters, and then the Solitude would have died. And they would have drawn extra cards and then not got shot. And they would have had the 1/1 to deal with, as well as the Orc army token. That's what would have actually happened. If they had another Veil here. And then that Veil would have also made this Orc army... I would have had to shoot at it. And it would have become a 4/4 if they had a Veil here. And then their other Veil would go off. This would have been a 5/5. And then Solitude probably would have taken out the Bowmasters. But maybe at that point they take out the 5/5 because 5/6, they're under too much pressure at that point. And if they do, like, it's still bad for them, right? This isn't even a loss if they have another Veil. So kind of cool. But yeah, that was it. And staff, cycling itself and giving me some pressure worked out quite nicely there. So that's it. Those are the games. Never had Tithe come up. Never had Crucible come up. A couple other cards that we just didn't see. Karn showed up briefly, and I got rid of him. But as Kanta came up, and you got to see Mentor in action, and all the other stuff happened. And yeah, it's pretty... wait a minute. What's going on? Oh, I was demonstrating my sideboard. I'm like, what is wrong with this deck? All right, we'll D sideboard, yeah? And that's it. That's the Esper version of the deck. Control, right? We've got classic the deck stuff going on here. We've got metagame solutions. We've got lots of cheap single target interaction. We've got lots of card drawing, mana denial, hand destruction, graveyard recursion in a minor amount, tutors in a minor amount. Effectively, like Karn can tutor from the sideboard, and we have a little bit of Narset digging and stuff, and we even have a Library of Alexandria, sort of. So yeah, very, very the deck feel to it, and feels very good to play. And like I said, it's been doing very well initially, but that was a bunch of beans games. So we'll see. I'll get more games in. I'll definitely let y'all know how it goes, and let me know what you think. I look forward to your comments. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.